When my son passed away, she showed up at that hospital, brought me a plane ticket, and put me back on a plane to New York City. And I had a lot of trauma, so I don't really remember the details. I remember staying in touch with the lady for the first few months. But it's those kinds of benefits or those kinds of compassionate actions that have occurred in my life that I have been a benefactor of that drives what I do for other people. And the old saying is to those who receive much have to give much, right? And so I kind of carry that into my role as a leader in terms of advocating for vulnerable people and for recognizing that we all have a collective moral imperative to help others, those who are least fortunate, because that's what happened for me. And I wouldn't be able to sit in the boardroom, and I wouldn't be able to sit at the table as a president and CEO or as a superintendent of a school district if it had not been for the compassionate actions of others who recognize through actions of care my plight at the time, whatever it was, whether it was having time to sit with the deputy chancellor of New York City and visit classrooms and be taught firsthand how to recognize what good instruction looks like, right? Those exposures and those experiences were invaluable to my development as a leader.
Welcome back to the Hart Hustle podcast. My name is Efrain, and today we have another leader in the building, Dr. Cade. When people hear your title, Dr. Cade, they might not picture someone who's actually moved through group homes, faced loss, and still showed up with purpose. What's that one moment from your early life that still fuels your fire today?
I think it was when I went to my elementary school, and I was 6 years old, and I moved out of the inner city of Brooklyn to upstate New York in Binghamton. And I had gone from a space where everyone looked like me to a place where there was only 6 other children that looked like me. And I realized at that moment that I was no longer going to be able to depend on my brothers and sisters. And I was going to have to step up, and I was going to have to become a leader at 6 years old, because I no longer had the cushion of my 6 sisters and my 2 brothers and all of the people that I knew. I was in this new environment, and I knew that I was going to either have to swim or I was going to sink. So at that moment, I realized that leadership, and I didn't have the words to say leadership, but I realized that I was going to have to become a leader.
Yeah. And life wasn't easy. You talked about going from the foster care system to now you're leading a huge organization. Like what helped you stay anchored during these times of the unknown?
Yeah, I think it was the compassion of others, people seeing my potential, regardless of the 6 different elementary schools that I attended, or the 3 secondary schools that I attended, or the 4 different group homes and the foster care home that I was in. It was always someone that saw potential in me, that extended the olive branch to help me to build a scaffold for me to reach expectations, and those expectations were high.
Yeah. It's a very tough place to be in. I can only imagine that there was times where you had these moments and you had to pause and think like, how did I really make it through this all? Have you had those moments? Like, what do you tell yourself when that thought comes to mind?
Yeah, I'm a big person that believes and leans in on my faith. I just recall at every moment of despair, it seems like there appeared someone that God sent to help me. And I remember being 6 years old, and that was the first time I had been taken from my family, and I was placed in this group home with other little girls. And it was a dormitory setting. And every night I would wet the bed I was afraid. I was afraid to go to the bathroom by myself. I was in shock. Um,
Mm.
and, and every morning the counselor would get up and humiliate me for wetting the bed, and berate me in front of the other girls. And then finally, one new resident showed up, a little girl named Nancy. And she didn't look like me, but she was in the same situation that I was in. And I remember that night she tapped me on the shoulder and she said, "Come on, let's go to the bathroom." And from that point on, she walked me to the bathroom every night and she played with me. And then it brought the other girls around to come play with me and stop teasing me about wetting the bed. And that was a pivotal moment in my 6-year-old life. And I remember moments like that during my times of despair. There always appeared someone that extended compassion and care to me, that revitalized hope.
I love that. And you've talked about love-driven leadership as well last time that we spoke, which is something that you hear in boardrooms too often. What does that actually look like when things do get messy at the top? Because it does. People may not see it, but it does. But how does it actually look like when you talk about, the things that people don't see?
Yeah, I think love driven leadership really leans in on humility and
Mhm.
compassion in situations where people don't display behaviors that you want to willingly give humility and compassion towards.
Mhm.
When I look at the trajectory of my career, I've been in a lot of turnaround situations when I was in the K-12 space. Now, serving as the president and CEO of Child Guidance Resource Centers, we're in the process of going through transition. But during my tenure, I recall times where people aren't so nice. So, love driven leadership commands that you still extend humility and you edify the dignity of others in display of compassion when they're not so nice to you, right? Because
Mhm.
that's leaning in on, and it's really focusing on leveraging obstacles, barriers, difficult times, um, and continuing to vow to move forward in excellence and in some form of care. That's what love driven leadership means to me. And it all connects to my faith. When I think about my faith and how intertwined it is into who I am as a leader, I often think of my favorite verse in the Bible, which is 1 Corinthians 13:13. Now abide faith, hope, love, these three, but the greatest of these is love, right?
Mhm.
And it goes back to this concept of love, whether it's leveraging obstacles, vowing excellence through equity, right? Giving
Yeah.
people what they need in order to reach their full potential. It goes back to this concept of care and humility.
Y- You also have the three F's that you mentioned as well: flow, force, and float, or float. Can you kind of break down what that actually looks like, especially for someone leading a team that's right now maybe low morale or stress? Because you have all these good things you bring to the table that I just loved the first time that we were able to have this conversation.
Yeah, when I've been working on my fourth book called Creating Organizational Values in Digital Times. And the premise of the book grew out of my work in the K-12 space and leading during the pandemic and looking at, my service across 4 states in education and, ascending to the C-suite in public education.
Hmm.
And I thought about my work as a change agent and a restructuring specialist. There are times in your career where you're met with this sentiment of flow, where you get into an environment and things are aligned and systems are effective and they're efficient and morale is high and people are happy and there is this flow and productivity is high and everybody is, and you as a leader are aligned to what's going on. And then you get into these situations, usually turnaround situations or situations where you're right sizing organizations or restructuring them. And there's this sentiment of force where systems are broken, morale is low, um, there is this rub between you, your leadership style, and where people want to go, and people, you're still in the process of trying to determine if they have the will to make the changes, to fix the systems, to advance the work, to increase the productivity, to restore the morale. And it just, this tension exists in the space with everyone. That's force. And then float is, you come to a pivotal moment or pivotal experiences once you've done your due diligence and your assessment, where sometimes you just may have to move on. You just have to float and you got to go. Because force is, you don't see force giving way to flow, right? Because at some point in most situations, force will give way to float if you continue to drive love-driven leadership as a key indicator for, turning people around. And I always think about the quote from Martin Luther King, and he says that you can't correct hate with hate, you must use love, right? That is the factor, right? And that is so hard to really demonstrate a sense of compassion towards people who are not being nice to you, right? So that's where the force, the flow, the force or float sort of concept comes in for me.
That's so good. And it just kind of goes back to your leadership, right? Those things and the way that you think and the way you break things down. And it all comes from moments in our lives. And I think that's what really makes great leaders, that we've had to overcome a lot, and we don't let it overcome us. We've actually learned on how to implement that into who we are on an everyday basis. When people told us that we couldn't, when we thought different of people because of what was being done to us, maybe in an early life. And you mentioned something last time that also kind of talked about how strangers were showing up in your life in ways you didn't expect. You just mentioned that little girl, a complete stranger, but still remembering what that made you feel, and also knowing what the other gentleman made you feel, whoever that caregiver was at that time. So people show up in some bad ways and some good ways.
Absolutely.
How does that impact how you actually show up for others now? And what is the thought process? Do you have a story that you can share?
Yeah. So I always say that you teach people how to treat you, and you learn from every experience. You either learn what to do or what not to do. You never lose, you always win. Because at the end of the day, if you learned something from the experience that you have, that will only allow you to be more resilient. That will only allow you to be able to be more informed about something. I remember a time in I'm trying to think, my life, where when I'll take for example my deceased son Jelani. I was 25 years old. My son was 22 months old, and he was born with congenital heart defects. He had defects in his liver. He didn't have a pulmonary artery. He just had some veins that was leading to his lungs, and he needed a heart, a pulmonary artery, a lung, and a liver transplant. And this was in the 80s, the late 80s. And at that time, the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, after 2 years of fighting with Medicaid, with medical people, to arrive at my son having an opportunity to have these multiple transplants at one time. I was on a plane from JFK in New York City heading to Pittsburgh. And at the time, I had been like a case manager working, and I had a master's, and then I got pregnant, had my son, and all of a sudden I had to go on disability for him. And that was our income, and his father and I were working together to get him this care. And I had $30 in my pocket, and I was going to Pittsburgh after they finally said, we will do the surgery. We will do the surgery. And my son kept crying, and there was an older lady sitting in front of me. And when the plane landed, and the flight from Pittsburgh from New York is not a very long flight, and the plane landed, and an older lady, white lady, approached me. She says, "Are you going to the Ronald McDonald House?" And I said, I looked at her, a little apprehensive. And I said, "Yes, I am." She said, "My husband and I would love to take you there." And that lady, she picked me up. She took me to the Ronald McDonald House. The next day she came back. She took me food shopping. She showed me Pittsburgh. And when my son passed away, she showed up at that hospital, brought me a plane ticket, and put me back on a plane to New York City. And I had a lot of trauma, so I don't really remember the details. I remember staying in touch with the lady for the first few months. But it's those kinds of benefits, or those kinds of compassionate actions that have occurred in my life that I have been a benefactor of, that drives what I do for other people. And the old saying is to those who receive much have to give much, right? And so I kind of carry that into my role as a leader, in terms of advocating for vulnerable people, and for recognizing that we all have a collective moral imperative to help others, those who are least fortunate, because that's what happened for me. And I wouldn't be able to sit in the boardroom, and I wouldn't be able to sit at the table as a president and CEO, or as a superintendent of a school district, if it had not been for the compassionate actions of others who recognized, through actions of care, my plight at the time, whatever it was, whether it was having time to sit with the deputy chancellor of New York City and visit classrooms and be taught firsthand how to recognize what good instruction looks like, right? Those exposures and those experiences were invaluable to my development as a leader.
If the Hart Hustle podcast has ever sparked any idea or made you think differently, do us a favor. Make sure to guys share this, post it on LinkedIn, or even text that nonprofit friend that you just have. Whatever works, this is what keeps the conversation going and allows us to just grow this community together. Seriously, we appreciate you. I mean, not as just a leader, as a strong Black woman, right? Like that's the most important thing, because the way that life has really taken you and put you through some things, you could have given up. I could only imagine that there was moments, Dr. Cade, that you thought, like, why me? Because already as a young kid, you were experiencing so much trauma, so much hurt. That was already something you had to overcome. And you talk about, what was happening with your son. That's something else you had to kind of overcome. But it seemed like one thing about God is he's always going to put people in your life that are going to get you through it. Because sometimes it's so hard for us. I mean, there's times that we had to get through it ourselves, and because mentally we had to think differently. Yeah. So I just want to give kudos to who you are as an individual. And I also want to kind of talk about how important mental health is. I had a friend that just spoke to me and said, I was going through struggles when I decided, I'm going to risk it all and I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to know my worth, right? And really, when I was going through that journey of leaving something that was so comfortable, putting my family on my back because I had 2 kids, I had the house, but now there's no income. My wife's a stay-at-home mom, but I had to believe in myself. So we were talking, he's like, man, it's money, right? Money made it seem different. And I said, nah, it really wasn't. Like, yes, money changes a little bit of things, right? Makes it a little easier on the mind. But it was having faith. It was telling myself it's going to get better. This is temporary. It was me listening to different types of music that just made the soul feel better, right? There was times where I'm laying in bed, I'm like, I got to go to sleep because I was doubting myself. It's not about the money. It's about mental health. And you're in a space where ideally that's big for you, right? Mental health in education actually used to be an afterthought. People weren't talking about it.
Right.
Now, to me, I feel like it's in the front lines. How are you pushing that shift, forward in real time? What are you doing with the organization, yourself personally?
Absolutely. So, being a recovering superintendent and coming into nonprofit space and leading a
Mhm.
behavioral health organization, for me is a full circle moment, right? And we spoke earlier, and I talked about, the fact that my mom suffered from mental health issues is the primary reason why I became a ward of the state, right? My 8 other siblings and I. And so I know through personal experiences how significantly important uh, it is to ensure equitable access to high quality mental health services. And in my previous role as superintendent or CEO of schools, I saw the overwhelming impact and outgrowth of the pandemic
Mhm.
exacerbate already existing trauma from serving under resourced communities. And we know disproportionately that the pandemic impacted
Mhm.
uh, low resource communities, minorities, disproportionately higher. So when we see the outcomes coming out of the pandemic, we should anticipate some of the side effects in trauma would exist, right? So I saw firsthand educators struggling because one, we've got all these vacancies, we can't fill positions, so they're doing double time. So that
Mhm.
compassionate fatigue is real. They're carrying their trauma coming out of the pandemic and now working with kids who have social development delays, significant
Yeah.
trauma going on, and their parents, right? So
Yep.
for me, this is an opportunity where I didn't have an opportunity to really directly impact that behavioral health piece in the K 12 space. This leading the behavioral health organization and us partnering with school districts and having our own tuition based mental health school, I see firsthand how the integration of this work is important. Now, I will say this, I've spent the majority of my career developing public private partnerships,
Mhm.
bringing partnerships to schools and creating sort of the undercurrent around community based schools or schools as hubs of the community, focused on James Comer work, Dr. James Comer from Yale University, or looking at Joyce Epstein out of Johns Hopkins University and her parent involvement framework, looking at places like Akron, Ohio, that focuses on community learning schools or schools that are the focus where they partner with the city of Akron to utilize the school space to have wraparound services, to focus on the holistic needs of children and families and taking education to a two generational approach. So this was a seamless transition for me in understanding the foundation of our health begins with our mental health and our physical well-being,
Mhm.
right?
I agree.
So for me, it's, coming into this space, learning now more intensely about behavioral health, bringing my own personal experiences that I had with family members and friends who had mental health challenges, and being able to advocate and being on the front end of that advocacy has been my entry into this work.
So good. Listen, every time you say me something more, I'm like, she should just own it. And we didn't even mention that you were also part of Biden's commission, right? I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Uh, what's something people don't realize about trying to create real change on that level? Because you've been on all levels when it
Yeah.
comes to change. You are really truly fighting for change at all levels.
Yeah, so serving at the Presidential Advisory Commission on Advancing Educational Excellence, Equity, and Economic Opportunities for Black Americans was a presidential commission where President Biden appointed 24 leaders from across our nation.
Wow.
And our focus was on creating recommendations for advancing education,
Hmm.
equity, and economic opportunities for Black Americans. I think it was the work that I've done across the 3 states and building the public private portfolios and understanding that education is it is the basis for economic development. And I say this, that companies look to open up their company in communities where the educational system is high functioning. The K-12 system feeds it feeds our businesses, it feeds higher education, and it feeds our workforce, right? That's the center of everything that our nation will be able to do to advance. It starts at K-12, right? Because of compulsory educational law, and kids having to go to school. So whether you not recognize that it's important that the business community partner with K-12 schools, higher education, partner with K-12 schools, legislators work with K-12 schools and other agencies to focus on advancing opportunities for children, ensuring that we're recognizing in K-12 what the core skills are that young people need, not just the academic skills, the soft skills, the interpersonal skills, the ability to collaborate, communicate, all of these skills, the exposure to STEM and STEAM, all of these things to develop well-rounded citizens who understand their democratic responsibility to vote, to solve problems in their communities, to solve problems in our nation, and to solve problems around the world, right? So that opportunity to serve on that commission brought together some of the most diverse and brilliant minds to write recommendations. I served on the Black Genius Committee, and what we did was we provided some recommendations around how to revitalize opportunities for entrepreneurship for people of color, and what that would look like with some of the inequitable access to capital funding, right? And looking at what the track and pathways are to Black wealth and in the Black middle class, or home ownership traditionally being the driver for Black middle class, but now we're looking at tech companies, technology companies, and capital venture opportunities in technology being a key lever in leveraging people and putting them in different social economic classes. So we got to learn from people around the United States, came to present to our commission, and then our commission got to write a white paper, which now, of course, has been taken down with the new administration. But that was such an enlightening experience to work with the United States Department of Education and the White House to go to Washington, D.C., and to work with senators and Congress people and United States Department of Education and President Biden and Vice President Harris at the time to really lean in on how to advance education and equity and economic opportunities for Black Americans. To have your voice be heard was powerful too.
Dr. Cade, as you sit here and just continue to just spill the beans on who you are and the opportunities you received in life, and to think that you were once a scared young girl, right? And this is why myself and Keenan create these platforms, because when you hear about the story on who you were, and at some point now, years later, you grabbed the pencil, you started to write your own story, you went through your own journeys, and life still happens, right? Life was still a roller coaster. Just because you aged out the foster system, or whatever that may look like, doesn't mean it was perfect. It was peaches, no. But it goes to show that we are human. We go through life, and with the right people, right, with the right resources, we truly have an opportunity. And it's never, to me, it's never too late. We talk about those young kids, but I hope that someone 20, 30, 40, 50 years old watches and hears what you're saying right now. Like, these are hell of opportunities. And I kind of want to shift this, because now we're really about to sit here and probably ruffle some feathers here.
Okay.
But we're in a place where resources are happening. You talked about some of the things that will be implemented, but now we're kind of going backwards, and funding is being lost. I'm talking to organizations that are losing people, that are losing resources. How does that make you feel? And what are you guys doing to kind of stay ahead of that?
Oh yeah, we are in nonprofit space and in behavioral health coming out of the pandemic. Technology certainly is changing our landscape, and we're in the process of transition here in child guidance resource centers, and we have our financial obstacles. And so, as we move into this new space where the fiscal climate is changing, coming down from the federal level, our fee for service is based on Medicaid. Most of our clients bill through Medicaid because they fall into a certain social economic bracket. We don't
Mm-hmm.
do private pay billing. Our
Mm-hmm.
focus has primarily been on under resourced communities. And so, having our own fiscal challenges and anticipating challenges coming down from cuts in Medicaid in a different, more rigid fiscal climate nationally and K
Mm-hmm.
12 and federal government. We have been very proactive with focusing on rebranding. We're in the process of going through strategic planning. We'll be a 70-year-old organization. Child Guidance Resource Centers will have
Wow.
existed for 70 years in 2026. It has contracted, it has expanded over those 70 years, like most nonprofits. We
Mm-hmm.
will continue to exist. Now, our footprint may change as we go through a restructuring process. I have taken the initiative in consultation with my board to join different CEO leadership groups coming in new to the space for that community of learners to learn best practices from my peers and to be a part of some learning cohorts also. But we've also are focusing on ramping up our development division, right? And
Mm-hmm.
exploring alternative funding streams that we have to be more aggressive about pursuing, right? And we're in the process, like I said, of going through our strategic planning process. So we'll be looking at some programs that we're going to grow and some programs that may have to go. And
Yeah.
we will make the adjustments so that we can continue to thrive and find the spaces where technology may be more applicable in our field. But we are rebranding. We're rebranding and having opportunities for platforms like this to just raise the level of visibility of our brand and our services. And one of our
Mm-hmm.
board members, our chair, often refers to us as sleeping giants. We're no longer sleeping. We're wide awake and we're getting the word out because people know that Child Guidance Resource Centers has high quality services. So one, we already recognize that we will expand in our school because we know that that funding stream is more stable and that there will always be a need for young people who have intensive needs that may not be able to function in a regular setting, but in our therapeutic setting, our young people are able to thrive and stabilize and able to go back to the comprehensive setting. So that's where we are. We're in that period of transition, but it's only going to make us more resilient and more creative, right? You
Mm-hmm.
know,
Mm-hmm.
when times get tough, what do? You become creative. You become
Yeah.
an innovator. You become a transformer, right? Because at the
Yeah.
end of the day, I'm not looking to exist. I'm looking to thrive and soar.
Yeah. And when you had the leadership and the experiences you had, this is kind of an easy task. Will it be easy as you're in it? Probably not. But you know that you have, the knowledge. I'm pretty sure you have a good team to be able to execute. It's just going to take time. It's going to take a little patience, a little faith,
No.
a little digging deep. And good thing we do have AI to kind of help us with the creative. Sometimes, we do have that opportunity to go blank. Okay, that
Absolutely.
happens to me all the time. Where I can't even think straight. But we got AI. We got AI. What's that one innovation or program that you've actually introduced that you're just most proud of? Something that really made a real difference?
Yeah, I can't say that coming in 7 months into this organization, into Child Guidance Resource Centers. I think that, one of the things that we've gotten more efficient at, and it's not me, it's a team, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
and I give credit where credit is due. For me as a leader, it is identifying intelligent and smart people and putting the right people in the right seats, right? So coming
Mm-hmm.
we have been able to streamline our financial operating system and upgrade it. We're looking and we're actually in the process now of doing a performance review to get some recommendations on how to strengthen internal controls and to ensure more operational efficiency with utilizing electronic and technology-based tools. So I can't take credit for anything. We're in the process of transition, 7 months coming in. But if I go to previous experiences in my role, one of the things that I was most proud of during the pandemic, and people laughed about this, when I was a chief academic officer in Sandusky City Schools, was I brought in little robots. Then the robots they looked like those iRobots, but they were maybe only like 2 feet tall, but they were actually hot spots. And for families, they were aligned to programs to iPad that helped with phonemic awareness. We're teaching young children in first and second grade how to blend sounds. And so the children were excited about the robots, and they all wanted to take the robots home for the weekend. And so you could take the robot home for the weekend or for a week, but you had to complete a certain number of assignments and a software program that we had utilizing games to teach young people to close those academic deficits. And so I was really proud about the robots, although my staff said the robots are freaking us out, their eyes, because the robots had infrared beams in their eyes, and we would use them in small groups with kids, a group of 5 kids. And if Ephraim wasn't paying attention, the robot would say, Ephraim, please pay attention, look at me. And the kids, would get freaked out, and they would pay attention, and they would get back to doing their work. But my staff said, oh, these robots are creepy. This is freaking me out. But that was, for me, that was
I love it.
The highlight of innovation and possibilities and opportunities to really, integrate technology in a different way.
And the way that your staff felt then is how a lot of people feel now. They're scared of AI, and AI is not even looking at them. You know what I mean? I mean, it is kind of looking at them every day on their phones. They don't even know they're using AI and text predictive and stuff like that.
Exactly.
But has the organization adapted AI, like when you talk about innovation and moving forward, or is something that you guys still thinking about?
It's something that we're still exploring. I did go to the statewide conference in the beginning of the school year when I was 1 month in as the CEO and president. And I wanted to get a pulse on the statewide sentiments around the integration of technology. And it was what I had anticipated, a lot of fear with people skeptical that AI and robots and technology would be making diagnosis for people with behavioral health needs. And what I would like to get out in terms of the message as we continue on this journey is that, one, you cannot replace a therapist, a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a clinician with technology. Technology is a tool to help with efficiencies. Now, perhaps we do have electronic health records, and most behavioral health companies are doing that. Where there are other ways to help, like we're doing collaborative documentation, where our clinicians now are implementing an approach where it allows them to document their time with clients in a collaborative way, where clients also have input in the development of the notes, right? Nice. So it's not really innovative. It's been out in the behavioral health field, but it's something that we're embarking on. We want to make technology a tool for the clinicians, for the therapists, for the psychiatrists, to sort of streamline some of the paperwork and documentation so that we can get more of that face-to-face time with the clients. That's the message that I want to get out.
Yeah, when it comes to AI, you hit it right on the head. It is truly a tool in your toolbox. It is not here for replacement. And if people just understand how to use it, how it could really benefit companies, especially in the nonprofit space, such the one I always come to, because it's the easiest one for people to implement, is writing grants using ChatGPT, right?
Absolutely.
And believe it or not, I still speak to nonprofit leaders now, and then when I say that, they're like, oh my God. So just imagine where some of these organizations are, and that's why I asked the question. Is some just ahead of others? And as we're wrapping up, Doctor, you truly have been the first Black woman in just multiple leadership roles. When you talk about breaking barriers, what did you really learn when you were in these rooms where you were the only?
Yeah. I learned one that leadership can be a lonely space sometimes when you feel like um, you're not seen or understood. Um,
Hmm.
and I also learned that I always have God. He's always with me. I'm
Yes,
never
ma'am.
alone. And I also learned that we are all human. And if we could focus on what makes us similar and look at our differences as opportunities to expand our understanding and stretch, we would be in such a better place as people, as
Hmm.
who are occupying this planet together, trying to ensure that we have the best quality of life and that we preserve as much of the planet for our future generations to have a place for our great grandchildren, right?
Yeah.
In order to thrive.
I love it. I love it. We'll start wrapping up here. For someone listening who wants to help but doesn't know where to start, what's that one small thing they can do today that would really make a difference within the organization? A lot of people think it's donations, and it's that monetary thing, but there's so much more. What could they be doing, Dr. Cade?
Yeah, you can help get the word out that www.cgrc.org is our website. Check us out. Check us out on Facebook and LinkedIn and Instagram and X, whatever it is called at this point.
I'm still calling it Twitter. I'm not calling it X.
Right. I think you can understand that we are in the business of helping build stronger communities
Mhm.
by providing services that help people heal and ensuring that affordable access to high quality behavioral health services are within reach of under resourced communities, and that is what we do. And so you can help by one, reaching out to families and telling them about us. You can come volunteer. We have our 5K, our run every year, where we do a fundraiser, but we also focus on educating people about alcohol, tobacco, and opioid and drugs. Right, that's a part of
Mhm.
some of the work that we do. We have wonderful programs for children who are on the spectrum or neurodiverse learners or autism. And we have residential programs for adults living with complex mental health issues that we manage. We deal with people who are appointed from the courts with truancy and family based counseling. We have so many services available, and they typically don't cost our clients anything as long as they're eligible for Medicaid. And so you can come volunteer at our 5K. There will be Delco Gives Day is coming up in Delaware County here in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, where the Foundation for Delaware County will have all of the nonprofits out, and we're looking to engage our community and share information about our services. And of course, donations help, especially as the fiscal climate changes. But that's not all you can do. You can show up and you can help be an advocate and a messenger and get the word out about who we are. www.cgrc.org, Child Guidance Resource Centers. And as we approach 70 years of inspiring hope and empowering others, we're looking forward to having a grand gala next year. Please join us once we get the word out and help us to inspire hope and empower others.
I love it. I love it. Dr. K, listen, this is going to be so good. 7 years is a lot of years of you talking about impacting communities. 100%. Kudos to the founder of the organization, and now to you to continue to lead this organization for another 70 years. This is not the blind question itself that one of our leaders had, but it's, I guess, one of my blind questions. And then I'll give it to Doug, which was the leader that we interviewed on the last one. But if looking back at everything that you've been through, what does resilience actually mean to you now?
Yeah. Resilience means you pick yourself up when you feel like you can't go forward. You continue to put one foot in front of the other, and you continue to fight. Sometimes I say to myself in the morning when I'm exhausted, come on, Vilicia, you got to fight. You got to fight. People need you. Resilience means you bounce back. And when you're the underdog, that you become the top dog, right? And, you become the top dog because you recognize that you've been in a similar space, and that if you lean in on your faith, that God has never really let you down.
Yeah.
He's never let me down. And when I change my mindset and focus on the things that I have control over, which is me, and I lean in on my faith and I consult him through prayer, things always get better. So resilience is picking yourself up when you feel like you have no more energy to go, and yet you continue to put one foot in front of the other. If you can't walk, you crawl. and once you're able to crawl, you walk. And if you can't run, you walk. And if you can run, you can get in a car, then you drive, and you just continue. That's what
I love
resilience
it. Thank you. Thank you. I think this is good. A lot of people in their lives, need that resilience. So what does that really mean?
is.
And that was a really
Hope.
good breakdown.
Resilience is connected to hope.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is Doug. Doug is another nonprofit leader. And he asked, what's a leadership belief you used to hold that you've completely outgrown now that you've stepped into the leader you are today?
A leadership belief that I used to hold that I've completely outgrown.
Yeah.
That
That was a good question. When he asked me that question, I'm like, wait a minute, Doug, you're getting a little too deep here. Now you're really
Doug,
making
what
me
are you
think.
trying to do? I think a leadership belief that I used to hold was that that change is hard. It is. But I think when you change your mindset and you embrace it as an opportunity, change is not hard. Change is an opportunity. And if we don't see it as an opportunity, we will stay stuck in the mud if we continue to think that it's hard. But change is an opportunity, and it's the only thing that we can really depend on, right? It's the only thing that's consistent, that things will change. Whether it's us physically, mentally, or our relationships with people, change is an opportunity. It is not hard. That's something that I had to relinquish because like, oh, this is too hard. I can't do this. But when you change your mindset, you shift that in your mind, you respond psychologically, physically differently to it.
That was a whole word right there, Dr. K. That was a word. I appreciate it. She said, I don't know yet, but it came to her. So I appreciate you giving us that. What is your blind question to the next leader that we have here on the Hart Hustle?
I'm feeling like my blind question has kind of been taken, but I said, can you describe one pivotal moment in your leadership journey that defines your why?
Okay.
Can you define one pivotal moment in your leadership journey that helped define your why?
Okay.
Because
we put somebody else in the hot seat.
Experience, right?
Yeah. We put somebody in the hot seat with that. I love these questions.
In a different way, right? But that is like getting straight to the point and connecting it to Simon Funk's The Why, right? Because what we do, it's all connected to a why. And, I can point out to multiple moments in my life. Like I talked about being 6 years old and I realized, oh gosh, I don't have my family to take care of me. I've got to be a leader, right?
Yeah.
And and I talked about, all these moments of despair, that hope was always extended in those moments of total utter despair. Somehow the glimmer of hope, a crack of light came in that darkness. And that's all I needed. That's all I needed.
Well, I appreciate you, Dr. K. You have been amazing. The things that we've learned, the gems you dropped, the stories you shared, it's truly what makes a difference. You know, not just what we do at work, but it's the stories that we tell, and it's being open and it's being honest. This is what the conversation that people need to hear, because I think it truly will makes a difference. It allows people to realize that we are humans, that we all go through things, that, you know, I'm adopted, you're adopted, but look where we sit here today in the conversation that we're having, and where God has really brought us, you know, and I really just say thank you to God, you know, if anything, because we're not here without it. You know, these conversations are not happening. He's allowed us to be resilient. He's allowed us to overcome. He's allowed us to be patient and believe. So thank you so much, Dr. K, for your time, for everything you've brought to us today. And I can't wait to see who the next leader is on the Hart Hustle podcast to answer that blind question you gave him today. But guys, if you're still watching, the easiest thing you can do today is just like, subscribe, and share. That's how we get the message out. We're not asking for anything else, but just that, because so many people need to hear this story. My name's Ephraim. This is Dr. Cade. We'll catch you guys on the next episode.
Bye, Ephraim. Blessings to you, brother.